You can access the entire episode now on our website, forbiddenknowledge.news, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. I grew up in a relatively dogmatic Catholic Christian home, and it didn't take me long to reject that religious belief system. But coming back full circle, I did come back to Christianity more from a mystical sense and less from the dogmatic, structured religious belief system that I grew up in. You took the Vedic path, and comparing this to the Abrahamic belief systems, there doesn't seem to be this hidden aspect of control behind these theological understandings. And I'd like to get, as best as you possibly can describe it, your understanding of Vedic beliefs and the spiritual ecosystem, seemingly, that comes along with this belief. There are so many deities and gods, and tell us how you navigate through this.
That's a good question. I do address a bunch of these points in my book during my journey because, again, people came to me. I came with questions myself. I definitely was riddled with, skepticism. I'm a New Yorker, so I'm skeptical about everybody. I'm not trusting necessarily. I've got to ask 10 billion questions before I sort of get it. And that was a tough one to swallow. I was like, wait a second, there's 33 million gods. I grew up in a Catholic background. It was a little dogmatic, but I could appreciate the teachings of Christ. And later, as I became a teenager, I thought, you know what? Whatever there is, religion or not, these are good things to be. Love your enemies, learn forgiveness, become tolerant and compassionate, have a spiritually based idea of reality. So I could relate to it like that. But at the same time, I like the idea of one supreme God. So when especially in the 60s, Eastern thought was taught like, oh, it's pantheistic. There's just millions of gods, and you just got to worship one of them or two of them, but they're all sort of the same. That's not actually how the teachings go. And more as Western scholars started to study, they realized that the teachings of India are very, very vast, in that it gives personality. And this is what I really loved about it. It gives personality behind all the elements of the universe. Everything is a being. For example, we are very tiny in this big universe, and similar to, say, a mosquito. A mosquito comes onto my body. It's not thinking like, oh, here's Ray Cappo, I'm going to suck his blood. He's thinking, here's this thing I suck. I'm not a being with the family, right? Especially if it's got malaria or dengue fever. He's not thinking, well, I'm going to transmit this disease, and I'm going to wipe out this guy's family. He's thinking, there's the thing I suck to survive. Now, we do that as human mosquitoes, so to speak. We take the earth and we suck from it. We take from the trees and we suck from them. We take from the plants and we suck from them. We never think those are beings. But in a Vedic concept, and that's why this principle of ahimsa is so important, which is nonviolence or minimizing violence on this planet. Why? Because everything is a being, and we learn to tread lightly and live lightly on this planet. We don't just we see a forest and think, how could I clear cut that forest, or blast or mine, or we think this planet itself is a being. This planet itself is a being, a living organism. And therefore, there has to be some respect, appreciation for every other living entity, outside even the human species. Right now, we struggle with, okay, we're the different race, different gender, different political parties. Not only are we supposed to connect with every living human being, but we're supposed to see it when it comes right down to every living entity, and have a type of dignity that we extend to all of them. And that comes even things that are beyond our perception. And this is another thing, how we are so steeped in this human arrogance, like we are at the pinnacle of evolutionary beings, and according to Vedic teachings, is you're not. We're actually we are in this. There are many more higher beings than us, and they speak about them, and they speak about their services within a cosmic universe, and then of course. And they're called Devis or Devas, and you know, anyone who studies Eastern thought a little hears of gods or goddesses, but they say above all the gods and goddesses is a Devati Deva, or a god of all the gods, and that's how a Abrahamic tradition could call God, Source, Allah, Jehovah, the God of all beings. The way I grew up in Christianity was that there's God and the Son of God. The rest of the world is a mundane backdrop. So, and almost like pagans, they are the lowest because they're seeing spirit everywhere. So I would say a Vedic teaching is sort of some type of hybrid understanding. Like, yes, spirit is everywhere, but the goal is not to worship the tree as God per se, or the river as God per se, but see them as all energies of the supreme God. And therefore there's a spiritual environmentalism as well that goes with these teachings. And how do you see Jesus then? Jesus, obviously, he's the Son of God. He's a messenger of God. He's teaching a pathway to God. It's not like we're saying, well, those guys are full of crap. They know nothing. No, they're teaching a bona fide tradition and path to understand source.
Yeah, man. I want to come
back. I
back.
can just keep talking, huh?
No, that's great. I want to come back to that, but I want to go back to the intelligences and the metaphysical ecosystem that surrounds us at all times. In a lot of spiritual and Christian belief systems, that there are negative entities that they call demons that supposedly have influence over people. They have the opposite spectrum, what they consider angels. And I want to get your perspective on what these polarities, these intelligences are. I'm at a current understanding that all of these are necessary parts of this spiritual ecosystem, that they're here for us to learn from and grow from, and learn what we don't want to align with, and to bounce off of these polarities and grow from them. But there are some that of the belief that we have these entities that are attempting to spiritually attack us and possess us and influence us and lead us down certain paths. What is your understanding of these different intelligences that surround us beyond our perception?
Thanks. That's a great question. It's an interesting question. I love this. Because cultures around the world talk about angel-like beings, guardian angels. They talk about demons. The Bible talks about demons. And who are they and what are they? They're entities. And I think it's safe to say that in our own life, we can cult the thoughts of demons. People do it all the time. They cultivate thoughts of extreme selfishness. Extreme selfishness where I want to enjoy my senses at anyone's expense. I couldn't care less, but I'm going to come out on top. And people do this to such sick extremes that they'll sell human bodies and traffic human bodies, or they'll rape a child, like real sick things. Now, at the same time, you can make healthy choices too. We can make healthy choices and we can make problematic choices. And I find that when I make a good choice, it leads me to a second good choice. If I make a second good choice, it leads me to a third good choice. Especially if I have the understanding that there is a difference between good choices and bad choices. I find that if I make a bad choice, it also becomes a very slippery slope. You can make one bad choice. It's safe to say, if you've ever been down the road of pornography, it's a bad choice, and it can lead to a mind that's extremely selfish.